The chamber holds its breath as Jasmine Crockett's final words slice through the echoing air like a sudden bell. Her voice is calm, but every syllable lands with the weight of a gavel, precise, unshakable, impossible to ignore. Cameras flash in staccato bursts, catching Pam Bondi's stunned expression, a face trained for television now frozen mid-rebuttal. The hush that follows is electric, a silence louder than any cheer. A single phone chime breaks the spell, then another. Within seconds, the sound of buzzing notifications spreads like a ripple across still water. Reporters glance down at their screens. Tweets are already flying. A trending hashtag begins to form before the last word has even settled into memory. The narrator's voice slips in, low and measured, as if speaking directly to the audience's racing pulse. 5 minutes earlier, no one in this chamber knew they were about to witness history. The frame freezes on Bondi's wide eyes. Lights from camera rigs cast a stark outline around her figure, isolating her in a tableau of disbelief. A swirl of whispered reactions rises from the back rows, staffers leaning into one another, aides biting their lips to keep from grinning. Every seat is a witness, every gaze fixed on the woman who just rewrote the evening's narrative. Outside the chamber, the world is already catching fire. Screens glow in coffee shops, newsrooms, and living rooms across the country. Clips of Crockett's final sentence hit social feeds like sparks on dry tinder. Comments flood in. "Did you hear that? Rewind. Play it again." The camera zooms slowly toward Crockett, who stands composed, almost serene, as if she knew this moment would arrive all along. Her eyes sweep the room, unhurried, unbothered. The silence she commands is its own victory. Pam Bondi shifts slightly. The faint creak of her chair carries farther than expected. She opens her mouth, searching for a response that refuses to come. The pause stretches, heavy and unrelenting, until even the microphones seem to lean forward, waiting for a sound that never arrives. The narrator lets the suspense tighten. But how did a seasoned political operative like Pam Bondi end up speechless? Let's rewind. 5 minutes before the silence, the chamber hummed with a different kind of tension, a restless, expectant energy that clung to the wood-paneled walls like static before storm. The hearing had drawn a crowd that stretched beyond Washington insiders. Cable news anchors lined the back row, their producers whispering into earpieces. Bloggers and podcasters hovered near the doors, eager to catch a soundbite that might define the next news cycle. This was more than another committee meeting. It was political theater on a national stage. The topic alone was combustible, a high-profile investigation into federal accountability and the misuse of power. Every question carried implications that could ripple into upcoming elections. Headlines were already drafted, waiting only for the night's pivotal exchange. Viewers at home settled in with the same anticipation as a prize fight, and the cameras caught every nervous glance, every subtle maneuver. Pam Bondi entered the chamber like a veteran stepping onto familiar turf. Her reputation preceded her, former state attorney general, seasoned media presence, practiced at turning sharp questions into applause lines. Dressed in tailored confidence, she greeted allies with a smile that hinted at easy victory. To her, this was another opportunity to dominate the narrative, to remind viewers why she remained a sought-after voice in conservative circles. The glint in her eye said it plainly. She expected to command the room. Across the aisle sat Jasmine Crockett, quieter, composed, a contrast in both energy and intent. She leafed through a small stack of notes, but her focus wasn't on the paper. Those who knew her recognized the subtle signals, measured breathing, steady posture, that meant she was ready. Crockett had prepared not just facts, but a strategy of poise, the kind that can't be rehearsed on television panels. Where Bondi sought the spotlight, Crockett embodied something more enduring, a determination to let truth speak louder than theatrics. The exchanges began predictably enough. Opening statements, perfunctory greetings, the rhythmic back and forth of policy talk. Bondi's voice carried the familiar cadence of authority, confident and slightly amused. Each question she lobbed was wrapped in rhetorical flourish, designed to corner opponents and draw headlines. She leaned into the microphone, smiling as if the evening's outcome was already secured. Yet beneath the surface, currents shifted. Crockett's responses were crisp, factual, free of the grandstanding that Bondi seemed to relish. Observers noticed the faintest flicker of frustration cross Bondi's face when her interruptions failed to rattle the Congresswoman. Cameras caught it. Viewers at home would replay it later in slow motion. The first crack in the facade. The audience sensed it too. Murmurs swelled whenever Crockett deflected a loaded question with calm precision. Staffers exchanged glances, unsure whether they were witnessing routine sparring or the early tremors of something larger. Bondi doubled down, sharpening her tone, but each jab met a wall of quiet confidence. Outside the chamber, social media ticked like a fuse. Reporters tweeted cryptic observations, tension rising at tonight's hearing, while live streams captured every nuance for an audience hungry for confrontation. Comment threads buzzed with speculation. Who would slip first? Who would own the night? Bondi mistook the quiet for concession. She leaned back, satisfied, unaware that her opponent was not merely answering questions, but setting a trap of composure. Her stillness was not passivity, it was strategy. The deliberate calm of someone who knows the tide is turning. Something invisible but undeniable hung in the air, a charge that prickled against the skin. Viewers watching in real time might not have been able to name it, but they felt it. The moment before lightning strikes, when the world seems to inhale and wait. Something was about to happen that would set social feeds ablaze. Pam Bondi's rise began far from the glare of primetime lights, but even in her earliest days as a young prosecutor in Florida, ambition burned unmistakably bright. Colleagues remember a sharp mind paired with a flair for presentation, traits that propelled her quickly from county courtrooms to statewide headlines. She mastered the rhythm of cross-examination like a conductor guiding an orchestra, anticipating objections, pivoting with ease, and relishing the drama of the moment. Success was never accidental. It was crafted, polished, rehearsed. By the time she campaigned for Florida Attorney General, Bondi had already cultivated the image of a relentless legal warrior. Her speeches crackled with certainty. Her television appearances radiated a confident charm that translated into votes. The public saw a fighter, someone who promised to protect law and order with unwavering conviction. Once elected, she became a fixture on national news, a familiar face called upon whenever a high-stakes legal battle seized the nation's attention. Bondi thrived in those high-pressure arenas. She argued landmark cases with a showman's timing, weaving legal arguments into sound bites that played perfectly on evening broadcasts. Courtrooms became stages, reporters her chorus. Whether taking on pharmaceutical giants or weighing in on polarizing social issues, she exuded the aura of someone unshaken by controversy. For Bondi, debate wasn't dialogue, it was domination. Winning wasn't merely the goal, it was the brand. Yet that brand carried shadows. Critics pointed to moments where ambition seemed to blur the lines between justice and spectacle. Investigative reporters scrutinized campaign donations that arrived just as certain cases conveniently faded from the docket. Commentators questioned her penchant for media appearances that sometimes eclipsed the legal substance of her work. Each controversy slid off with practiced deflection, but each also added a faint crack to the veneer. When her tenure as Attorney General ended, Bondi didn't retreat from the spotlight. She expanded it. Cable networks courted her for commentary slots, political campaigns sought her endorsement, and high-profile allies welcomed her strategic instincts. On television panels, she became known for sharp prosecutorial jabs delivered with an easy smile. Viewers either applauded her fearlessness or bristled at what they called calculated showboating, but no one denied her command of the screen. That command fostered a quiet certainty. She believed she could read any room, steer any conversation, bend any opponent to her rhythm. Years of victories reinforced the belief. When lights turned on and microphones went live, Pam Bondi expected to control the narrative. Her wardrobe, her cadence, even the arch of an eyebrow seemed designed to remind audiences that she was the authority, the voice to trust. It was this confidence, admired by supporters, criticized by detractors, that she carried into the high-profile hearing where Jasmine Crockett awaited. Bondi entered the chamber like a seasoned performer arriving for an encore, nodding to familiar faces, offering a quick quip to reporters stationed near the aisle. Her tailored suit gleamed under the committee lights, and the subtle lift of her chin suggested she anticipated another effortless victory. To Bondi, the evening promised a familiar dance: spar with opponents, deliver a headline-ready zinger, exit with cameras chasing her remarks. She had done it countless times before. Debate, after all, wasn't a search for mutual understanding. It was a contest, and she'd had long since mastered the art of winning. But outside the chamber, the political landscape had shifted. Audiences hungrier for authenticity than theatrics were tuning in. Social platforms no longer merely amplified talking points, they dissected them in real time, rewarding clarity over bravado. Bondi's trademark style, once a surefire way to dominate, now risked feeling like performance for performance's sake. Inside, Jasmine Crockett embodied that new current, a poised presence grounded not in spectacle, but in substance. Bondi, confident in her proven methods, hardly noticed. She reviewed her notes, exchanged a quick smile with an ally across the table, and prepared to do what she always did: command attention, win the room, leave opponents scrambling. For a moment, it seemed inevitable. Cameras adjusted, reporters whispered, and Bondi leaned into the microphone with the ease of someone stepping onto her personal stage. The first questions rolled out smoothly, her voice carrying that familiar blend of authority and charm. She felt the old rhythm returning, the one that had served her so well. Yet beneath the polished exterior, subtle signs flickered, tiny warnings she brushed aside. A pause in the audience's response, a sharpened gaze from the Congresswoman across the aisle, the faint awareness that her usual tactics were meeting an unexpected steadiness. These were tremors, almost imperceptible, but real. Pam Bondi, the consummate political power player, had built a career on controlling the narrative, on turning every debate into a decisive win. Tonight, she believed, would be no different. But tonight, that strategy met its match. Long before cameras captured her poise on Capitol Hill, Jasmine Crockett learned how to stand her ground in places where few were willing to listen. She grew up in Dallas, the daughter of hard-working parents who carried both the pride and the weight of generations striving for opportunity. Their dinner-table conversations mixed encouragement with realism. The world was not always fair, but dignity was non-negotiable. From those evenings came a quiet conviction that the measure of a life was not how loudly one demanded respect, but how steadfastly one earned it. School hallways tested that conviction early. Crockett was the student who spoke up when classmates were teased, who challenged teachers if a rule felt arbitrary or unjust. Friends remember her as the one who refused to look away even when silence would have been easier. That instinct to defend others wasn't bluster. It was the natural expression of someone raised to believe that truth was worth the discomfort it caused. Her path to law began in the rhythm of those small acts of defiance. College sharpened her voice, but it also introduced the grind of systemic barriers. Professors who underestimated her, internships that expected gratitude instead of fair pay, peers who doubted that a young black woman from Texas could command a courtroom. Crockett responded the only way she knew, by working harder, studying longer, mastering every detail until doubt had no foothold. Law school in Houston was a crucible. She balanced coursework with jobs that barely covered rent, spent late nights in the library while others celebrated downtown, and endured the subtle condescension of those who assumed she was a diversity statistic rather than a scholar. Each slight became fuel. By graduation, she was known not only for academic precision, but for the steel in her cross-examinations, a lawyer who blended empathy with an unmistakable edge. But it was in the trenches of community activism that Crockett's character hardened into something unshakable. She returned to Dallas as a public defender, taking cases many attorneys avoided, clients who could not pay, neighborhoods others wrote off. Day after day, she confronted the inequities of a system tilted against the poor. Overcrowded jails, rushed hearings, families torn apart by minor offenses. She lost cases she should have won, and won cases everyone expected her to lose, each verdict a lesson in persistence. The work was grueling and at times dangerous. She received late-night calls from frightened clients, faced off against prosecutors who mistook compassion for weakness, and walked into courtrooms where her skin color and gender drew skeptical stares. Yet colleagues recall that she never raised her voice unnecessarily. Her strength was in her calm. Judges noted it, juries felt it, opponents eventually respected it. Crockett had learned that composure could be its own kind of force, a weapon that disarmed bluster and exposed pretense. That reputation carried her into civil rights advocacy and eventually public office. She campaigned not as a polished politician, but as a neighbor who understood the weight of everyday injustice. Her rallies were less about slogans than about stories. Families denied fair housing. Workers cheated out of wages. Young people stopped and searched for no reason beyond their appearance. Voters recognized the authenticity. They saw someone who had walked their streets, argued their cases, shared their frustrations. When she spoke of dignity, it wasn't theory, it was lived experience. Inside the legislature, Crockett's legal mind became a shield for those who rarely had one. She crafted bills to strengthen voter protections, fought for criminal justice reform, and challenged policies that eroded civil liberties. Colleagues learned that behind her measured tone lay meticulous preparation. She read every page of legislation, anticipated counter-arguments, and arrived at hearings with evidence that left opponents scrambling. Yet what set her apart wasn't just intellect, it was her refusal to let anger dictate her strategy. She understood the temptation to match arrogance with outrage, but she also understood how quickly that could be used against her. Instead, she cultivated a presence that absorbed hostility without giving it power. Reporters noted how even in heated exchanges, she never appeared rattled. Supporters came to trust that when Crockett spoke, she spoke from a place of unshakable clarity. Those closest to her know the private cost of that public calm. They have seen the late nights, the quiet moments when the weight of injustice threatened to break through. But they have also seen the discipline that steadies her. Early morning runs, hours of quiet reflection, the grounding conversations with family and lifelong friends. These rituals are not indulgences, they are armor. It is this armor she carried into the high-profile hearing where Pam Bondi waited. Crockett knew the cameras would search for weakness, that interruptions and condescension would be weapons wielded without shame. She also knew that every pause, every breath, Every carefully chosen word could turn the evening into something far larger than a political skirmish. Her life had trained her for precisely this moment. The lessons of childhood, the crucible of the courtroom, the relentless fight for community justice, none of it was abstract. Each step had been a rehearsal for a confrontation where dignity itself would be on trial. When Crockett straightened the stack of notes before her and looked across the chamber at the seasoned power player preparing to dominate the night, she felt no need to raise her voice. These lessons weren't theory, they were her armor. The hearing began its slow burn with the ritual politeness of official proceedings, but the undercurrent was already restless. Cameras shifted like watchful eyes, zooming for any sign of friction. Pam Bondi leaned toward her microphone with the confidence of someone who had owned 1,000 rooms before. Her first question was sharp but routine, a probing challenge wrapped in a lawyer's smile. Jasmine Crockett answered evenly, her voice measured and precise, each fact laid out like stones across a stream. Bondi did not wait for the final word. "But you're avoiding the core issue," she cut in, her tone brisk, dismissive. "Respectfully, I addressed," Crockett began. "That's not what I asked," Bondi pressed, the second interruption slicing through Crockett's sentence. A murmur flickered through the audience. Camera one panned to Crockett's face, still composed, eyes steady. She offered a small nod and continued as if the intrusion were nothing more than background noise. Bondi leaned back, then forward again, launching a third interjection before the Congresswoman completed her next point. "We need clarity, not political spin," she said, her voice pitched just high enough to dominate the chamber's acoustics. Crockett paused, inhaling slowly. The microphones caught the breath, a soft counterpoint to Bondi's sharpness. "I believe clarity is exactly what I'm providing," she replied, enunciating each word with deliberate calm. Fourth interruption. Bondi raised her hand as though conducting the dialogue like an orchestra. "But the American people deserve a straight answer, not a lecture." The tension thickened. Aides exchanged uneasy glances. Reporters' fingers hovered over phone screens. Camera 2 caught a spectator biting a lip to suppress a gasp. Crockett did not flinch. She said, "I agree," simply, letting the silence that followed carry its own weight. Fifth interruption. Bondi's voice sharpened, a flash of irritation breaking through her polished exterior. "You're still not responding to the question I asked at the outset." Crockett's reply came unhurried. "Perhaps the question keeps changing." The line landed gently but with a subtle edge that drew a low ripple of reaction from the back of the room. Bondi pressed again, sixth time, talking over Crockett's next sentence. "Let me rephrase for you can finally give us something concrete." The cameras found Crockett's hands resting loosely on the table, fingers interlaced, perfectly still. No eye roll, no sigh, just the quiet authority of someone unwilling to be rattled. Seventh interruption. Bondi nearly rose from her seat, voice carrying a note of exasperation. "Congresswoman, this is a simple yes or no. Why can't you answer?" The room seemed to contract. Even the overhead lights felt suddenly harsher. Viewers at home could almost hear the collective breath being held. Crockett tilted her head slightly, a gesture of composure so controlled it bordered on defiance. "I will answer," she said at last, "but I will do so completely because the people deserve the full truth." Her tone remained even, each syllable a quiet rebuke to the chaos of interruption. Bondi sat back, the faintest frown crossing her face. The air between them vibrated with an intensity that no camera lens could soften. In the gallery, someone exhaled audibly, the sound amplified in the sudden hush. A reporter's pen tapped nervously against a notebook. Across social media, live commenters began to note the pattern. 7 interruptions, still unshaken. Crockett resumed her explanation, voice unwavering, every word a study in restraint. Each fact she delivered felt heavier than the last, the chamber growing stiller as if the walls themselves leaned closer to listen. Bondi remained silent now, but the tension she had built lingered, suspended in the thick air of the committee room. Every eye followed Crockett, waiting for the next exchange, for another spark. But Crockett's steadiness left no opening, no weak seam for further attack. The cameras lingered on her calm face, capturing the contrast, one woman fueled by relentless interruption, the other fortified by unbreakable composure. Then came the moment no one saw coming, the 5-minute stretch that flipped the script.
A hush settled over the chamber, so sudden it felt like the air itself had been drawn away. Jasmine Crockett sat motionless, fingers still interlaced on the desk before her, the embodiment of collected power. Across the table, Pam Bondi's pen hovered mid-tap, the confident rhythm that had punctuated her interruptions finally stilled. Cameras tightened their focus, lenses narrowing, as if they sensed that every second from this point forward would be replayed 1,000 times before the night was over. Crockett began with a single, deliberate breath. "Madam Chair," she said, her voice carrying a calm authority that made even the fluorescent lights seem to dim. "I will answer completely, because the people deserve the full truth." The opening words were simple, but something in their cadence drew the room closer. The committee's murmur ceased, even the press gallery quieted, pens hovering. She started not with accusation, but with clarity. "The question posed," she continued, "relates to the integrity of our public service and the evidence before this committee." A pause, long enough for Bondi to interject if she dared. None came. "Let the record reflect," Crockett added, "that every claim raised tonight has already been addressed through documented testimony and verified data, all of which this chamber holds." The first ripple of reaction came from the gallery, a faint gasp, the scrape of a chair leg. Crockett allowed it, then pressed forward. "When we speak of accountability, we must also speak of consistency. And consistency," she said, locking eyes with Bondi, "requires that we hold ourselves to the same standard we demand of others." Bondi shifted slightly, a subtle adjustment that betrayed unease. The cameras caught it, the slight tightening at the corners of her mouth. Crockett's gaze never wavered. She reached for a single sheet of paper, sliding it into view with measured precision. "This document," she said, "details the timeline you questioned earlier. It has been entered into evidence, and I invite every member here to review it." Her tone sharpened just enough to cut through the quiet. "It contains the very answers you have interrupted me 7 times to demand." A low murmur rippled through the audience. Reporters' thumbs danced over screens. On social media, hashtags flickered to life, #7 times, #Crockett clarity, #mic drop moment. Crockett continued, each sentence landing like the measured toll of a bell. "When we interrupt the pursuit of truth with theatrics, we do a disservice not only to this committee, but to the citizens who sent us here. Our duty is not performance, it is principle." She paused again, letting the weight of that final word settle. Bondi's eyes flicked toward the cameras, then back to Crockett. For the first time all evening, the practiced smile faded. "In my years as a public defender," Crockett said, voice steady, "I learned that the loudest voice rarely carries the strongest case. Facts do not need volume, they need patience." She leaned forward slightly, her tone softening without losing force. Patience and the courage to let the full story be heard. A collective breath swept the chamber. In living rooms across the country, viewers leaned closer to their screens. Notifications multiplied as clips of the moment hit social feeds in real time. "Did you see this?" one tweet read. "Crockett is giving a masterclass." Bondi cleared her throat as if to reclaim the narrative, but Crockett anticipated it. "I will finish," she said, not unkindly, because the American people deserve to hear this without interruption. It wasn't a rebuke shouted in anger. It was a boundary drawn with unshakable resolve. Now she laid out the facts in a cascade of evidence, dates, correspondences, legal precedents. Each point was crisp, each citation irrefutable. She spoke of constitutional duty, of the oath every official swore to uphold, weaving law and principle into a narrative that left no room for doubt. With each revelation, the tension tightened, yet her delivery remained almost serene, a stark counterpoint to the fireworks Bondi had tried to ignite. The crowd reacted in waves, first quiet nods, then audible murmurs of assent. A reporter in the second row mouthed, "Wow!" Phones lit like constellations as messages and alerts multiplied. "This is history," someone typed. "Watch now before it's everywhere." Crockett glanced briefly at the gallery, acknowledging the buzz without breaking rhythm. "We are not here to trade insults," she said, voice ringing a touch louder now. "We are here to safeguard the public trust. That trust is earned not through spectacle, but through integrity." Her eyes returned to Bondi. Integrity means listening, even when the truth is inconvenient. The words landed like a gavel. Bondi blinked, her posture stiffening as if bracing for impact. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, the silence more revealing than any rebuttal. Crockett pressed on, her tone almost gentle. "I welcome scrutiny. I welcome hard questions. What I do not welcome is the erosion of civility, because when we lose that, we lose the very democracy we claim to defend." The committee chair shifted, clearly moved. Around the room, even seasoned journalists appeared caught off guard by the quiet force of the Congresswoman's delivery. It wasn't merely a defense, it was a lesson, a reclaiming of purpose. Finally, Crockett let the last sheet of evidence rest on the table. She clasped her hands again and allowed a beat of silence, the kind that demands reflection. When she spoke, it was almost a whisper, yet it carried to every corner of the chamber. The room erupted, not with applause, but with the unmistakable rustle of awe. Pens scratched furiously, cameras clicked in rapid bursts. Someone in the back whispered, "That's it. That's the clip." Across the country, the hashtags exploded. Hashtag dignity over noise, hashtag 5-minute finish, hashtag Crockett mic drop. Bondi sat rigid, her practiced confidence dissolved into a stare of quiet disbelief. The woman who had built her career on commanding every conversation now found no words. Her fingers tightened around the unused pen, the motion small but telling. Crockett offered no triumphant grin, no outward sign of conquest. She simply leaned back, letting the silence expand. The victory was not in theatrics, but in the undeniable authority of truth delivered without a single raised voice. For a moment, the entire chamber seemed suspended outside of time. Reporters frozen mid-note, audience members locked in rapt attention, even the committee chair momentarily speechless. It was a 5-minute stretch that would echo far beyond those walls, a masterclass in composure that turned interruption into irrelevance. Then, almost imperceptibly, the world resumed. Phones buzzed, cameras refocused, and the hum of whispered astonishment filled the air. But nothing could erase the image already burned into memory. Jasmine Crockett, unflinching and calm, while Pam Bondi, once certain of victory, sat silent.
Before the committee chair's gavel could fall, the chamber's silence fractured into a low, electric murmur. But outside those walls, the noise was already deafening. A junior producer in the press gallery fired off a 10-second clip to her network's Slack. Within 60 seconds, the footage of Jasmine Crockett's 5-minute masterclass began its sprint across the digital world. The first ripple appeared on X, where a congressional reporter typed a single line,
5 minutes, one voice, silence everywhere else. Attached was a 30-second clip of Crockett calmly dismantling Pam Bondi's arguments. By the time the tweet refreshed, likes and retweets flashed in a blur. The hashtag Crockett Clapback materialized like a thunderclap, followed seconds later by hashtag 5-minute finish. Both trended nationally before the hearing even adjourned. Instagram Reels came next, rapid-fire edits layered with dramatic music, captions screaming, "Watch her shut it down." TikTok users stitched reaction videos, wide eyes, gasps, spontaneous applause in kitchens and dorm rooms. One viral comment captured the collective awe. "This is what composure looks like when truth is on your side." Cable news producers scrambled to catch up. By prime time, every major network led with the clip. On MSNBC, anchors replayed Crockett's quiet but devastating line. "Facts do not need volume, they need patience." CNN rolled out split-screen analyses, while even traditionally conservative outlets couldn't resist the headline, "Bondi silenced in stunning exchange." Late-night comedians sharpened their monologues. 7 interruptions, and she still got schooled like a freshman debating a Supreme Court justice. The studio audience roared, and the punchline rocketed across social feeds before the next commercial break. Celebrities added their voices, turning a political hearing into a cultural moment. A Grammy-winning singer tweeted, "Jasmine Crockett just gave a clinic in dignity. Replay that in every civics class." A beloved actor posted the clip to Instagram stories with the caption, "5 minutes of pure democracy." Even athletes weighed in. An NBA star quote-tweeted the video with a simple legend. Across living rooms, group chats lit up. Immigrant families messaged cousins overseas. "This is the America we believe in." College students paused late-night study sessions to pass phones around, whispering, "Did you see that?" Parents texted adult children, proud of leaders like her. For viewers who rarely tuned in to congressional hearings, the clip was more than entertainment. It was validation, a reminder that calm conviction could still win the day. Editorial boards rushed to frame the moment. One op-ed called it a modern lesson in democratic grace. Another described Crockett's takedown as the kind of statesmanship too often missing in the era of viral outrage. Commentators noted how the Congresswoman's poise stood in stark contrast to the usual political theatrics, proving that dignity could trend harder than spectacle. But perhaps the most telling reactions came from those usually silent. In districts far from Washington, community organizers replayed the exchange at town halls, drawing cheers when Crockett's steady voice cut through again with "dignity over noise." High school debate coaches wove the clip into their lessons, pointing out the power of composure. Churches and neighborhood groups shared it as a Sunday inspiration, an unexpected sermon on the strength of listening. Pam Bondi, once the dominant presence in any room, became a footnote in the coverage. Headlines that had once followed her every move now framed her as a cautionary tale, when interruption meets unshakable calm. The same pundits who'd predicted an easy night for the seasoned operative now dissected her silence with almost clinical fascination. She came in expecting a sparring match, but Crockett refused the script, and that's why she won. By dawn the next morning, the clip had surpassed 20 million views across platforms. Journalists called it the 5-minute finish, a phrase that stuck like glue. Hashtag merchandise popped up within hours, t-shirts, coffee mugs, and stickers emblazoned with Crockett's closing words. Street vendors near Capitol Hill sold them before the next committee hearing even convened. Yet for all the noise, the heart of the moment was quiet resolve. Commenters returned again and again to the stillness in Crockett's delivery. One viral post read, "She didn't raise her voice, she raised the standard." In that reflection lay the cultural flashpoint. This wasn't just a skirmish between two public figures, it was a rebuke to an entire era of political shouting matches. Viewers who had long felt drowned out by bluster saw themselves in Crockett's calm. Immigrant families recognized the patience forged from years of proving worth. Young activists found a model for how to command a room without a single insult. As the day unfolded, journalists stopped asking whether the moment mattered and began asking how far its echo would travel. City councils referenced it in speeches. Podcasts dissected every pause, every glance. Even high school students in debate clubs recreated the scene, studying how a measured breath could outmatch a raised voice. By nightfall, the narrative was clear. Those 5 minutes were no mere viral spectacle. They were a cultural marker, a reminder that truth, delivered with dignity, could still cut through the digital din and hold a nation's attention. And as the hashtags continued to surge, one question pulsed across timelines and airwaves alike. If composure like Jasmine Crockett's could command the world once, what might happen the next time she steps to a microphone?
Long after the last camera light dimmed and the hashtags began to settle into the steady rhythm of trending history, the meaning of that night only grew clearer. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just silenced an opponent, she had redefined what victory in public life can look like. In an era where shouting often drowns out sense, she proved that dignity still carries the longest echo. The morning after, newspapers described the exchange as a 5-minute civics lesson. Commentators dissected every pause, every calm glance, until one truth stood undeniable. Crockett's triumph wasn't about humiliation, it was about elevation. She refused to match interruption with interruption. She refused to trade in theatrics. Instead, she anchored herself in verifiable facts and a quiet conviction that service to the public must stand taller than anyone's ego. That choice matters far beyond one committee room. Democracy, at its healthiest, depends on more than ballots and statutes. It relies on a culture where disagreement does not decay into disrespect, where evidence can breathe louder than insults. Crockett's performance, if it can even be called that, was less a rebuttal than a reminder of what civic courage looks like. She offered a blueprint for leaders who believe that the public square should be a place of substance, not spectacle. Viewers across the country felt it. Teachers replayed the clip in classrooms, inviting students to discuss the difference between winning an argument and proving a point. Community leaders cited her words in Sunday gatherings, drawing a connection between patience and power. Immigrant parents told their children, "See, you don't have to shout to be heard." In those living room conversations, the night's lesson took root. Composure can be revolutionary. And there was another layer, a quiet validation for anyone who has ever been underestimated. Crockett's calm dismantling of the moment carried echoes of countless personal struggles. The worker overlooked because of an accent, the student dismissed because of background, the advocate doubted for refusing to play loud politics. For them, her restraint was more than strategy, it was solidarity. She showed that you can stand firm, speak truth, and still walk away with your grace intact. Pam Bondi's silence became an unintentional metaphor. The absence of a comeback wasn't just personal defeat, it symbolized the futility of noise when confronted by steadfast fact. It reminded the nation that public service is not a stage for domination, but a trust to be honored. And it left viewers wondering how different our politics could feel if more leaders chose the same path. Crockett, for her part, downplayed the drama. In brief remarks the next day, she said simply, "We're here to serve, not to perform. My duty is to the truth." That humility only amplified the message. She was not interested in viral fame. She was interested in standards, of evidence, of respect, of public duty. Perhaps that is why the clip kept spreading long after most viral moments fade. It wasn't just entertainment, it was aspiration. People shared it not to gawk at a takedown, but to remind themselves and each other of a higher bar. They watched it to remember that facts outlast fury, that service outshines ego, and that democracy can still reward those who choose light over heat. By week's end, commentators called it a cultural turning point, but for millions of ordinary viewers, it was something more intimate, a personal charge. To speak with clarity, to listen with patience, to insist on truth without surrendering dignity. Crockett's 5 minutes became their mirror and their mandate. And so the lesson lingers. Politics will always have its tempests, its provocateurs eager for the spotlight. Yet the memory of that night stands as proof that the calm center can prevail. Facts will outlive theatrics. Service will outshine ambition. And dignity, quiet, steady, unstoppable, will always carry the final word.
Pam Bondi, silenced forever. That's the headline burning across every feed. But the story isn't just about a single 5-minute takedown. It's about what happens when truth refuses to shout and dignity refuses to bend. Jasmine Crockett showed the country, and maybe the world, that calm conviction can stop arrogance in its tracks. Think back to the moment the room froze. No gavel, no raised voice, just facts laid out like bedrock. That quiet strength is more than political theater. It's a reminder of what each of us carries into every debate, every workplace conversation, every family argument. When truth speaks with patience, the noise around it collapses. Now it's your turn. Where have you seen dignity win over bluster? Maybe it was a local council meeting, a classroom debate, a kitchen table disagreement that could have exploded but didn't. Share it, post it, tell us in the comments. Your story matters because every example of courage and composure chips away at the culture of shouting that threatens our democracy. If this moment moved you, if it made you believe, even for a heartbeat, that calm clarity can still change the narrative, help keep that energy alive. Like this video so more people see it. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that facts outlast fury. Subscribe and join a community determined to elevate dialogue over spectacle. Pam Bondi's silence isn't just an ending, it's an invitation. Let's fill that silence with something better. Truth, respect, and the kind of courageous conversation that builds a stronger country. Dignity won tonight. Let's make sure it keeps winning. One voice, your voice, at a time.